basically. So do you want to go ahead and like start first? Like saying, we're not saying anything, but you basically are on the side of pro-choice.
Yeah.
Do you want to like
Yes.
say like your main reasons for why that is? Or I guess
Yeah.
I want to know the main reasons. I feel like we've had this conversation before, but we can go
Yeah. So I guess for me, it's like, I'm pro-choice mainly because you don't really know what and like we've discussed before, you don't really
Mm-hmm.
know everyone's situation. And
Mm-hmm.
so like in the case, like, and like speaking from my personal experience, how I told you about my sister, knowing her and like how
Mm-hmm.
she's very mentally immature and like she's just not, she doesn't take care of herself. And
Mm-hmm.
so bringing in another life and having that responsibility is just,
Exactly.
it's not only going to put more stress on herself, but it's going to end up making her resentful to her child. And it's just going to bring another, it's going to bring another child into the world, and
Mm-hmm.
he or she is not going to have a good life
Yeah.
because of that, the foundational relationship with their mother.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and then of course there's also incidents where it might be a health risk, or the baby might come out
Mm-hmm.
defected, or which that's not to say that if a baby comes out with Down syndrome, or whatever kind of ailment it might have,
Mm-hmm.
that's not to say it's not a life that's worth saving. But some people just aren't in a good mental space
Mm-hmm.
or financial space to have a child. And so for me, I think it's up to us whether we're ready to have a child, or if we're just like stable, because
Mm-hmm.
having a kid changes everything. Like, not just, it's not like a cat or a dog,
Exactly.
it's a
You
whole
can't just go pick
child.
it up at a pet store and then be like,
Yeah,
that's
and
mine.
then love it
Yeah.
on occasion, but like that's 24/7, 365, like 100% committed. And some
Exactly.
people just aren't ready for that. And I mean, like, I feel like even though a lot of us are pretty mature, like from you, I feel like you're pretty mature and I feel pretty mature, but I would not be mature enough to have a child.
Exactly.
And so I think having that opportunity to have a safe way to make that decision is really important, because we shouldn't force, especially like our younger generations, we shouldn't force them
Yeah.
to bring a life into this world if it's just going to be negativity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Especially with,
that's,
I could see your point of view of like, we don't like to admit it, but there always is that negativity with like a young teen mom. And you're
yeah,
just like, no one likes to admit it, but that decision that they make to
yeah,
keep the baby is like, either way, it's just it's a hard situation to deal with, because
yeah,
it's a touchy subject, because people don't like to like see that a girl that young has been like dealing with a situation like that. And one thing I
yeah,
will say is that like I totally agree with the whole, like I feel like it always does usually fall on the girl. Like
yeah,
I get kind of frustrated with the whole aspect of that it's just the girl's fault, or it's like just that, or but then
mm-hmm,
it also, I could turn that around to, it's not just the girl's problem, because there is situations where like, let's say the woman doesn't want to keep the baby, but the father knows that like he could have had a son, and like it's, again, like you said, it's all about the situation itself. So
yeah,
I totally, I come from a background that's, I was always on the side of pro-life, because I feel, you know, growing up in church, and I feel like it also does come back to like a religion thing,
yeah,
which
for sure.
is like a lot of things in like heavy subjects do come back to that, because it comes back to
Yeah,
like our, our backgrounds, our
our
morals, and stuff like that.
roots.
The
Yeah,
roots, exactly. And I feel like I for so long, I had just, for the longest time, just like honestly, just put like how do I say this? Like, I don't want to say like a wall up, but automatically just kind of, there wasn't a yes, there was just it's always life. It's always pro-life.
Yeah.
Anything else is like horrible. And as I grew older and like got into college and, became a young woman and had friends who had experienced pregnancy scares and like hearing your sister's story, like, and just seeing like how it's not something so out there, it's like people actually deal with it, is
Yeah.
has opened my eyes so much in the fact that like it's not just a black and white answer. There's so many things that come into play with that. One thing I will say, that the arguments I've seen with a lot of people who are pro-choice against people who are not pro-choice, people who are pro-life against pro-choice, is they always say that like, well, if they were responsible enough to go out and have sex, they're responsible enough to be able to deal with having the child. And I'm
Right.
like, I think we're forgetting that we're humans, and I mean, well,
Yeah.
like that you got to think that we are all like affected by lust and love, and those, like, when it gets to situations like that, you're not thinking about the side effects, or most people aren't thinking about the side effects of like, okay, this, I could end up pregnant by the end of it. You're thinking like you're just in love with that person, or like you're just
Yeah.
in a moment. It's not so much of the fact of that you're, it's not to say that just because you went out and had sex, you're not responsible for a kid and you made that decision. A lot of the times when young teens or young adults, like, most of the times you see abortions on that side, but there has been abortions where like the mom just didn't want it, or there's, again, it goes back to, there's so many different situations. Like, I
Yeah.
remember hearing about a case way back, we had this subject with my parents, and hearing about a case of like a 14-year-old girl who had gotten raped, and it was like she didn't consent to it, and she ended up finding out she's pregnant, and like going through her actually having to like be pregnant, it wasn't going to be good for her health or anything. And I can see, like, if I was that person, I could see like, wow, I would really get an abortion, because I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to have to like,
Well, and you're 14. I mean, you haven't
exactly.
even hit your like you're still underdeveloped, you're still immature. Like you have your whole life to live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair for someone to take that away. And I guess what people fail to realize, as well as like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
when they're like, oh, well, if you were bold enough to go out and have sex and get
Mm-hmm.
pregnant, you have to deal with that responsibility. But what they fail to realize is that choosing to have an abortion and choosing to keep that child is
Mm-hmm.
still going to be a decision that weighs on that person,
Exactly.
regardless of what they choose to do. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they're not being held accountable for their actions. They're still going to have to live with that. They're still
Exactly.
going to have that emotional trauma, the physical trauma, I mean, financial trauma, because abortions aren't cheap. So, I
Oh,
mean,
no,
in
still.
all aspects, they're still going to have to be accountable in some way, shape, or form, whether that's having the child for 18 plus years or not having the child and having to live with that decision they made. So,
I totally agree. And I feel like it's such a problem. I mean, that's one of the things I will say, that like I am pro-life, because I feel like most situations, not most, I don't want to say most, because again, every situation is different, but there are some situations where the decision is kind of just made based off of fear, because I mean, there are situations where the woman just feels like she doesn't want to deal with it, or I mean, usually, like, I don't want to say that in a rude way.
I get what you're saying, though.
I feel
I see
like
what you're
there's
trying to
not
say.
enough support out there for the tough situation. Like, I
Yeah,
feel like people forget that there's the idea of adoption. There's the idea of like, you could have the kid, but then you're not going to take, like, you don't have to technically take care of the kid. There's adoption. There's people who like don't want you to have to go through that. Um, and then again, that ties in, like, let's say the husband wants to keep it. He technically has a
yeah,
right to, but then again, it gets kind of iffy, because it's like, it's not your body as well.
right.
It's so, it's so layered, and it's definitely not a black and white situation.
No, not at all. And I
I
think to some extent, we're all kind of, like we've talked about before, we're all kind of in that little middle space
Yeah.
because, like you said, it depends on the situation. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, if you're pregnant and you're having second thoughts, you should get an abortion.
Hmm.
Every situation is unique, and everyone should have the opportunity to take advantage of those choices.
Hmm.
So I think, and like you said, it does go back to our roots because, like I've told you before, my mom was Catholic.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, I was raised, if you get pregnant, it's a gift from God and you should
Mhm.
cherish that gift. But kind of as I got older and I became exposed to other ideas and other concepts and stuff, I was able to kind of create my own ideology and
Mhm.
still kind of work in my values because obviously life is a gift. It's precious. It shouldn't
Yeah,
be taken for granted. But at the same time, I don't see any justice in putting a child into unfit hands.
exactly. I could definitely see that. I come back to the um faith thing as well. Like, but again, like you said, life is a gift. And I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be sitting here if my mom chose abortion over having me. Like,
Yeah.
I think life is so important. So I also think the big thing is, no, I think the biggest problem is like when government tries to come in and
Hmm.
set just one rule, like set like
Yeah.
this is the say all be all, when it's not that case. Um, I will say that timing is something that I will always stand on. I feel like, again, decisions, I feel like there should be more, um, hold on, Lexi's on a call. Hold on. I think there should be more, not so much, I mean, easier said than done. I wish there wasn't such a, like everyone's tiptoeing around the situation. I
Like
wish
it's
there was
taboo to
more,
talk about.
yeah, I wish there's more places that like would help women, would help families in that situation to like really talk it out, really go through counseling, really go through like, is this what you want to do? And then help them if they do choose to have an abortion. Because
Yeah.
it's not an easy situation. You like for people to put blame because of the situation that they made is completely wrong. Like, and then to turn it around and say it's a religious thing and say God doesn't love you and like and kick people out of the church for that situation you made. It's like we said before. I think that's a faulted view that we've put on religion where it's not about the rules and it's not about everything. It's more about like, or at least in my personal life, it's about the faith. It's about the relationship with Jesus Christ. And that like
Yeah.
there's nothing in this world that any human being can do to separate you from his love for you and your ability to be saved. And so that's why I hate when there's this stigmatism around like women who've made those decisions or families who've like gone through that and been persecuted and not persecuted, but like been treated differently because of the decisions they made.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, they're like, that's a sin, that's an unforgivable sin. You killed someone, or I mean, you read the Bible, or you read it, people. Paul was a murderer of Christians, and then he turned into like one of the biggest Christian
Yeah.
whatever. So it's just like I don't think that ever. I mean, we're getting off sidetrack because that goes into the whole faith
Yeah.
aspect. But one thing that was trying to get to, my brain's going everywhere. But what was I think the only law that should be in place is that if you are thinking about abortion, I believe that you should have the choice, but I think there comes a time in the pregnancy that like you're too far in. There's no like you can't be like if the
I
baby's
agree
about to be born
completely.
in like a few days and you're like I don't
Yeah.
want it, that's a completely different process than getting abortion early on or like getting a
Yeah.
like. And I feel like that's a situation that could have been fixed, could have been talked about, could have been everything. But again, there's situations where people don't even. I mean, have you ever watched that show where it's like I didn't know I was pregnant?
Oh yeah.
Where I was like,
Yeah.
how'd you not know? Like, and then she like
Yeah.
had her child in the toilet. I was like, you did what? But I mean, that's just there's
Yeah.
freak accidents like that. And I do think, I mean, that I don't know, I may be wrong, but there was a case in New York where the woman had a baby and she didn't want it. And so she had filed for abortion. And I was like, the baby's already here. And then she's like, no, I don't want it, but I don't want the baby anywhere else. And so she went to court and she aborted the baby. And I was like,
Wow.
wow. I mean, like,
I
that
feel
should
like
be
that's
illegal.
not classified as abortion
Bullshit.
though. That's murder.
Yeah, like
It's already a living, like,
that's
okay, I
murder.
can see where it's, yeah, like where it's gray because like some people argue that, it's a baby, it's a life.
Hmm.
And like in some cases, if you kill a pregnant mom, you'll be charged with a double homicide. But in some
Exactly.
cases, it's like, okay, well, it's a bunch of cells. It's
Hmm.
not formed yet. It doesn't have arms and feet, it doesn't have a brain, this and
And
that. But to go out of her way to have the child and then go to court and then abort it, that's not even a thing. Like
yeah,
I don't know how that is, but I do agree with you on how like late term abortions, especially since they pose a higher risk to not only the baby but to mom,
hmm,
definitely should not be a thing. They should at least put like a limit, like,
exactly.
third trimester, that's it,
And that's
or
where I feel like
middle of second.
that's where I feel like government really only has a say. Like for any law to come into play to like take away someone's rights of how they choose to live their life or decisions they make, I think it's completely wrong. And I think that's where it gets very like people out there very, oh, I'm only on this side. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you have not taken the time to sit down and hear someone's story, and you've not taken time to do that. And that's where I'm just like, that's completely wrong. But I do think there's things that timing is a thing. Timing's a big thing.
Yes, for sure.
Because if the baby's already born and you don't want it, which I find very hard to believe. Like I remember watching that case, or I forget the girl's name, but it was a really big case in New York, and everyone's shocked that she actually like went through with it, or like the doctors were like, okay, that's okay. And I don't remember if it was like the baby had defects or had said something, but oh, that like you kill. It's almost like that it's living, it's breathing, it's there. I mean, that's where
Yeah.
it comes back to the whole: is it cells or is it a baby? Like that's a whole higher level of thinking. It's like no one's going to be
Yeah.
able to answer that question because no one knows
Yeah.
why two different cells from two different bodies come together and form like a
A new
completely different
person.
organism. Like, like I always go back to, I mean, like taking chemistry classes and learning about, the periodic table and thinking about like all those atoms and thinking about that, like, okay, so you're telling me that this like banana that we don't say is living, I mean, we say it's living, but it's not, it doesn't have a life, but it's
Yeah.
living, has like almost like the same amount of cells and is made up of the same things, just put together differently than I am.
Yeah.
Like, like we don't like, when does it become to where like we have a sense of life and that banana doesn't? Like, I mean, that's a stupid
Right.
analogy, but it's like there is that thing that humans have that make us different than any other species in the world, of like we think about why we're here. An animal's never going to think about like, why am I mean, they might like, have,
What's my purpose?
yeah, like they might have, like survival skills, or like thinking like, okay, I'm going to eat this, not that, but like they're not thinking long term, or they're not thinking like, they're not there's not that higher level of thinking. That's what makes us different. And
Yeah.
I think that that's why we have conversations like this,
Yeah.
asking
Well, that's
asking the why.
also, yeah, and that's also like goes back into why life is so precious because we
Yeah.
are higher functioning, we're people,
Hmm.
and I don't know, it gets kind of messy because I think a lot of people, like you've already touched on, just don't take the time to consider other people's
Hmm.
situations. And I think that it doesn't just pertain to abortion exclusively. I think if people were able to kind of be more compassionate in all
Hmm.
aspects of their life, we probably wouldn't have as much disagreement as we do now, especially like in the climate we're in.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a shame because it's really an easy fix. Like it's not, oh, we need government, we need defund the police, we need this and that, we need these
Hmm.
rights. It's really just taking a step back and kind of like what we in that book, like take yourself out of the box for just a second and try to understand and see that person as a person and not just
Hmm.
something that you like as an object. Like,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's kind of sad because we strayed away from that. Like And it's really sad because in our faith or in our spirituality, we can't even be openly like, and it's kind of hard. I mean, I'm sure you can
Mhm.
relate, but it's kind of hard to be openly spiritual and not be judged and
Oh
not
yeah.
be criticized.
Oh yeah.
And it's sad because you're just trying to share that positivity, that faith, that love,
Mhm.
and it just isn't reciprocated. And it's
Yeah.
really sad.
Yeah. And it comes back to the whole, I mean, to the morals of everything. Like, we grow up in different cultures, we grow up in different households and everything, and it's like not every, like, again, like you said, it takes also growing up, being educated, which I'm not saying not having education, but there's this book I read way back when. It was a C.S. Lewis book. It was called Mere Christianity, and he brought it back down to like a scientific level of like all basic human beings. We're not all basic, but like
Basic.
there's this certain morality that human beings have, that he's like, why he tried to ask the questions of like, why do humans even have the ability to ask why? Like, why do we even have these idea of a higher power in the first place? Like, why do we all generally think killing someone is wrong? Like, he went back to like these moral things, and it was just it made at least faith for me. We as a society have turned it into such a religion, rule following, persecuting thing, when
Yeah.
I really feel like it's a lot more of relationship and love, and trying to understand yourself. And to be able to do that, you have to be able to understand other people, to like hold up
Yeah.
that mirror and to get to know yourself and who God made you to be, which again, I am biased to that because I grew up in church, grew up having a
Yeah.
religious idea of things, where some people don't even know Jesus' name, don't even have a idea of ever thinking higher power, anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
We could go on and on about that, because I mean that's a whole different layer. But that's one
Yeah.
thing with abortion, is people disregard that layer ever comes in. I mean, they don't, but it's like they don't. I always say they. I'm guilty of it too. Before, of like just thinking that everyone thinks the same way you do, and that's the
Yeah.
whole idea of self-deception, is not realizing that the way you think is affecting how you're treating others, and you
Yes.
have to like be able to evolve and hold up that mirror to yourself and be like, hey, I think a certain way, and that's going to be different than someone else, and being okay with that.
Yeah. And like actually like kind of what you said, at the end of the day, we kind of all have, even considering our different backgrounds and our different like how we grew up, we kind of have the same fundamental,
Mhm.
like I think it's safe to say we kind of have the same fundamental core values. Like,
Mhm.
we all want to be happy, we want to be treated
Mhm.
fairly,
Mhm.
and I think people are so quick to just try and achieve their own personal happiness that they forget that we're all in that pursuit. It's
Yeah.
everyone's pursuit for happiness, not just mine. And no one other person's happiness is more important than the other.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I totally agree. I think we're all fighting for the, like, we all forget that most of us are on the same side. Most of us are in
yeah,
that gray middle. Like, it's in media, it's portrayed in media, it's portrayed in life, and we automatically go to the seeing them as that and seeing me as something else, and not,
yeah,
and
the
like we
defensive.
forgetting that, like, stop, we're all humans, like, point blank, like, that's it.
Yeah,
Like, seeing that we're all in the gray area,
yeah,
which is, again, easier said than done.
yeah.
And I really do think growing up comes into that, you know, aspect. But then I think about, like, I've watched psychological videos, and you see these young kids, and you show them pictures of something that as an adult, is like, you see it as one thing. Like, I remember there's a video I watched where the little kids, they would say, like, there was a what was it? It was a picture of like an African American kid and a white kid, and they were like in a picture, and they were playing. And seeing that, and then the child was asked, what's different between these two kids? And then the child will just go straight to, well, that one is holding a red bucket, and then the other one's holding like a shovel, and they're playing in the sand. But that's different. And they don't see all the things that I feel like as we grow up, we're blinded to, or like we grow into our own bias. Like and I think if we don't acknowledge it while we're growing up, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. More lens get put on, more biases get
and it's like that pyramid that he showed us. Remember, it was like, I forgot what it was, like stereotypes. Or maybe it was bias, stereotypes, and then discrimination, or something like that. There were
stereotypes, prejudge, and then discrimination.
There you go.
Again, like you're gonna have those things as a kid or as you grow up to start navigating the world, but it's whether you take that to the level that you take it to. Exactly. Which such deep topic.
I know.
It gives me chills.
But we can agree that at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all, just trying to find our place. And as long as we can continue seeing each other as people, then there might be hope for some type of resolution.
I
someday, hopefully.
I want to be that optimistic and be on that side of hope, because if not, it's just why live in that agony? Like, why live in agony? There's no hope when you can live in that hope. But easier said than done. But I really do appreciate like taking this class and like being able to find people to like have conversations like this. Like I like needed it, honestly. Like it's like eye-opening, and it's also like it brings you closer to who you are as a person, who I am as a person, like who you are as a person.
You get to learn things that you didn't know about yourself, and it's kind of fun to, like, especially with the book, I think I enjoy that the most, is like reading it and being like, oh wow, I did that, or like wow, I can really see how I behaved and how that might have made that situation a little more difficult.
It's almost like finding relief of answering that question of why, like why, like I feel like you go through life asking your purpose and asking like why problems happen, and talking about it and reading that book, it's almost getting you closer to the, what, that probably happened because I thought this way, and
and like we, at the end of the day, we're becoming better people. And I think that in itself is going to create a better society, a more accepting society.
Totally agree. I wish everyone in our college campus would really read that book and just like have conversations like this.
I've recommended that book to all of my coworkers. I'm like,
really?
Read it. Yes. I told my general manager, I was like, you have to read this, and we have to start doing something, because the culture at our store is so toxic. Like I can barely even, I'm like, stay out of the box, Justice, stay out of the box.
Kind of like,
because they're trying to put me in there. I'm like, not today. I'm staying out of the box.
And honestly, like, start handing it out to customers. Like, you told me that one story,
a pamphlet
that she just like blew up at you. I would have been like, lady, here, like,
I have a book for you to read.
I got you a good read. Yeah. I definitely wish there was more conversations like this. But I mean, that's just culture and society. You can't fix everyone. I mean, it's not about fixing everyone. It's almost like, I don't want to give this book to fix people. I want it to be like, I want you to read this because it helped me. Like, it helped me open my eyes and stuff like that. I can totally relate. My mom, I'm like looking at this window, so bright, but my mom just I was like, who is that? That's why I was like, she just pulled up into the drive. But I mean, again, I do appreciate like you being so open and about sharing your side, because I mean, especially having a family member had gone through something like that, that's
and it's kind of
incredibly difficult.
It's kind of nice too, because like being able to talk to someone other, because like I said, my family kind of grew up on the pro-choice side or the pro-life side, and so it's kind of hard, especially since like my sisters are all younger than me, and so they're growing into they're into their own people, and it's not like I can talk to my mom and be like, hey,
Yeah.
this is okay. And like for a while she was like, you can't be putting your ideas into your sister, and I'm like, I'm not, like, this is her choice. And so it's kind of nice to kind of express it and not be like, and I know, like, I love my mom to death and I'll do anything for her, but, and like you said, it's kind of how she grew up, and I can't fault her for that, but it's nice to be able to talk about it to someone who has similar, like similar values, but isn't so harsh or so quick to just be like, oh no, you're wrong, like this is not how you should believe. So it's refreshing to be able to have that conversation and kind of open up about that, because it was so abrupt, like it just happened over the summer, and I haven't really had time to process it either, so it kind of brought back all of the feelings, and so it's kind of nice, it's kind of therapeutic to get to be able to talk
I'm
about
glad.
it.
I definitely do think that, again, the whole stereotype thing goes into generations as well. Like there's things that I would never talk to my mom about ever. I mean, like I would want to, but it'd be weird because it's just, she grew up in a different time. Same with grandparents. It's harder to relate to them being younger because there's that aspect of they're older than me. Like you should always listen to your elder type thing, but again, that whole idea of listening to your elder comes back to cultural aspects. Like I grew up respecting grandparents, stuff like that, whereas some people, it wasn't like that, but I definitely do think it's, again, like you said, refreshing, and it definitely does help talking to people in your same generation, and like again, being able to find that, like, even though we are different, we're again more alike than we are different. I mean, I will say, taking this class, and like it's helps me have more conversations with parents and elders. I keep saying elders. Grandparents, grandma, grandpa. They sound like they're 100 years old. They're not. But it's like, it's helped me have conversations like this, going into it knowing that, like, what they say doesn't have to affect me, doesn't have to change me, doesn't have, like, I can have a civil conversation with the things that I've learned from this class, things that I've learned from reading the book, of going into it, seeing that, like, okay, I could be a problem. They're probably seeing me like as this. And if I come into it approached as like seeing their point of view and understanding it, but then also still being able to, say my part and be okay with them not agreeing with the part, like, which is easier said than done, because it's like you want your parents or grandparents to understand you, but then it's like you have to realize that they grew up different, and I think that's something I had such trouble with as a kid, is forgetting that my parents are actually people. Like it's hard to envision them as young high school students, or like, it's hard to envision
like, you
them as
can't
like,
relate, mom.
like, oh, you don't know, and I'm like, well, maybe she does know. It's just, it's been so much longer for her since she's gone through something like that, and it's kind of wrong for me to again put that lens on her and be like, she doesn't understand. So I will say, I totally agree with you. It's refreshing to have conversations with people my age, but it's also like I get the struggle, and in the like, I can't talk about that with other people. But I will say, like, this class has helped me slowly start to get there. That's not saying that I'm just gonna up and be like, hey mom, so who was your first? Like, like, no, I don't want that conversation, really. Like, that's kind of a touchy subject. And like, again, I don't like thinking about, I mean, I'm here for a reason, because of my parents. If they ever have a conversation about, how I came to be, like, no. That is, TMI, get a bedroom, goodbye. Like, no. But yeah, I definitely do love this conversation, appreciate it.
It was nice.
I see in your background the core water bottle. I love those things.
Oh yeah.
Do you ever, okay, like, do you, maybe it's just me, but do you ever like keep the bottle and then like use it and then refill it? Because I just think like the smart water bottles or like the core, I always just keep them and then use them as water bottles with like tap water or like my fridge water.
Yeah. Or yeah, like yeah. Sometimes I'll probably refill it maybe 2 or 3 times and then I'll get a new one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because I just think they're so much cooler than like those plastic. I mean, I do have like an actual like water bottle you can get from Target,
Yeah.
but they're also cooler than just the generic plastic water bottle
Yeah.
from like Kroger or something, you know? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna stop recording
Okay.
because I feel like I don't even know how long has it been.
I don't know, girl. It's been a while.
Hopefully YouTube's still gonna let me upload it, but I'll go ahead and stop it here and then
Okay.
let's see.